welcome everybody. It's good to see you all, and thank you for coming on. We'll just run through some housekeeping to get started, but welcome to your first putting it into pulling the pledge together kind of setup of webinars. So general housekeeping. So if you want to have your microphones off, just so we don't have too much background noise, and when I stop speaking, I'll also do the same so that there's not too much noise in the background. By all means, if you want to have cameras on, please have them on. However, if there's any signal issues, you might wish to turn those off just to keep your call running smoothly. Please do get involved in the chat box, share any feedback, etc. The slides will be shared with you after the session, and obviously it will be recorded. If you don't want to be recorded, then please do turn your camera off, and then obviously we will make sure that obviously you get the necessaries as that's moved through. Anthea, if you want to flick on, perfect, thank you. So key agenda for today will be going through the process of our webinar series. So the key objectives of those will be to listen and learn from each other. So you'll have two strategic partners through each of the webinars that we have as part of putting our plan into action. With that, there'll be a deep dive into any of the topics that we've got going on. So during the course of today, Anthea is going to share her Ibstock EDI journey. There'll be an opportunity for any questions and answers, and then there will have Karen Hughes sharing her journey of EDI through Genuit Group. Any feedback that you give to us will be built and used throughout, and of course, like I say, I'll monitor that chat box as well. So if there's any questions, feel free to raise your hand, and we can do those through the Q&A periods or through the chat box. Then we can do that. Jeff, I've just seen you've popped a chat box in there. That's absolutely fine, no problem at all. And yeah, like I say, please do enjoy the call, get involved as much or as little as you want to, and we'll look forward to hearing your feedback as you go through. Anthea, over to you.
Thank you, Kerry. Okay, so let me introduce myself. I'm Anthea Maris. I'm currently the project director for the CIC on secondment from Ibstock, where my home role is head of talent and development. And I've spent 4.5 years working at Ibstock, and I've been responsible for leading the ED&I journey at Ibstock. And today I want to just give you a whistle-stop tour of what we've been working on our ED&I journey at Ibstock. I'm going to cover quite a few things. If anyone wants to know any more detail, please put it in the chat box. And hopefully this presentation and Karen's will inspire you to think of some other topics you want to deep dive on in the future. So let us know in the chat box if there's anything that really strikes your interest, you want to know more in the future. So let me get started. At Ibstock, we branded our ED&I journey building belonging, hence this visual in front of me today. But I'd like to just give you a little bit of background, just make sure you know who we are. So Ibstock has been around for 200 years. We have a vision to enable the creation of homes, places and spaces for people to live and work better. We manufacture clay and concrete building products. We've got around 2,000 employees across 40 different manufacturing sites. We're a FTSE 250 business, and in 2022, we generated £500 million in revenue. So that's a little bit about us. In terms of our ED&I agenda, I'd just like to share with you our why. It's always a good place to start there. So at Ibstock, we've separated diversity from inclusion. We think that you can't have one without the other, and we have been working quite hard on inclusion over the last few years, and because we believe without inclusion you can't do diversity. I'll say a bit more about that later. But in terms of our why, this will be familiar with you. A lot of the business case for ED&I is similar for everybody, but in terms of inclusion, unless we create an inclusive environment, we aren't going to retain the people that we recruit. So we want to recruit a diverse workforce, but we need to make sure they feel they can be themselves and drive an employee engagement. So we've really been focusing on that. But in terms of diversity, our share owners do expect us to make progress on this area. They expect us to be a much more diverse company, more gender representation, more ethnic representation. We know if we don't address ED&I, we won't attract the best talent, and we all know we're in a war for talent. Our employees expect us to create an inclusive workplace and embrace ED&I, and our future employees will expect that too. And I guess for me, most importantly, by driving ED&I, we create diverse thinking, and we know that diverse thinking drives better decisions and greater innovation and makes us more successful. So that's why we've been really prioritizing this agenda. Going back to the beginning, I would say our journey started before I joined Ibstock back in 2017 with the setting up of a Women in Business Forum. And this was a networking and education forum for female colleagues of Ibstock, although male colleagues were invited to attend as well. And although it didn't make massive changes in the diversity of our organisation, it did lead to the improvement of female facilities across our sites. So as a result of that, we improved our toilets and showers across all our manufacturing sites, and we did have a really good look at the PPE and change the PPE we offered to female colleagues. So that was the very sort of start of the journey. And I came along, say, in 2019, and from about 2021, we really picked up the focus on ED&I. So in 2021, back then, we started to talk about ED&I. We talked about the fact that that it was really important for all the reasons I've talked about before. We created a sort of a strategic narrative, and we started conversations with both our executive leadership team and our main board. And we decided to treat D&I as a strategic priority. So today, ED&I is built into our business strategy. It's a key element under our growth pillar of our strategy, and it's also a key part of our ESG strategy. So since then, I describe what we've done is we've put some great foundations in place, and we've really focused on educating our employees. So we've really focused on creating inclusion, and these are some of the things that we've done. So back in 21, we created a D&I working group, which is made up of people from within our business, from all levels, all areas of the business, who are passionate about driving diversity and inclusion. And we wrote out to people and said, look, we want to go on this journey, we want some help. And we had about 25 colleagues come forward who were really keen to get involved. A year later, we actually broke that D&I working group down into 4 different affinity groups, and people joined the affinity group following their own personal commitment and energy. So we now have a gender, a race and religion, an LGBTQ+, and a disability affinity group, as well as we have a separate track looking at wellbeing, and we also have a wellbeing working group as well. And those groups have done loads of work, and in a minute I'm going to share some of the examples of the work they've done. We launched a Building Belonging Ibstock brand, which I showed you earlier, just to hang everything together. We had still have executive team sponsorship of the agenda, so a member of our executive leadership team chairs the ED&I working group. And then over the last couple of years, we've run ED&I training for all of our senior leaders, and we've run dignity and respect training for all of our people managers across all of our sites. And then in terms of diversity, what we've done is we've had a really good look at our recruitment processes, and we've reviewed the imagery that we use, the language we use in adverts, and we've started to collect data, diversity data from candidates, and start to monitor our attraction. We've created a diversity charter to drive consistency in the way we do recruitment. I'm going to share that with you in a minute on another slide. We've communicated an external target for women in our senior leadership roles. We've collected diversity data. We've done it twice, because the first time we did it was in 2022, and we only had a 30% response rate. Did it again last year and had a 75% response rate. So I'll share a bit of that with you in a minute. And also, we've been active in our local communities to build connections to attract a broader group of people applying for our roles. And for example, we are currently building our Pathfinder factory called Atlas in Aldridge in the West Midlands. And this is going to be the factory that will produce UK's first carbon neutral bricks. And we've been working with that factory to ensure that they are creating an inclusive workplace, so putting in place lots of things like wellbeing rooms and prayer rooms, etc. So it's inclusive, but also we've been working with them to get out into the community to build connections with the local mosque, for example, to try and attract a broader group of people to the roles as we advertise them for our new factory. So that's a bit around what we've been doing. A bit of it more of some examples. So here is a list of examples that have been driven by these affinity groups. And this is just some of the stuff they've been doing over the last couple of years. So we've made period products available to all female washrooms. We've created prayer rooms. We've celebrated Pride across our sites, both in 2022 and 2023, and had a really, really positive impact to that. We've celebrated International Women's Day since 2021, and the last couple of years we've been running virtual events with Vistry, one of our biggest customers. We've run menopause awareness webinars for both men and women. We've signed up to Hidden Disabilities membership. Last year we did a big campaign around Black History Month, where we ran a colleague question and answer session where people could ask questions of our Black colleagues, and it was very well attended. We've done educational visits around Ramadan and Eid to religious buildings. And I think what I'm most proud of is numerous employee blogs on our intranet on a whole range of topics. So people telling their own stories on topics from autism, deafness, Ramadan, Vaisakhi, Pride, Pansexual Awareness Day, a whole range of stuff. We've now got our colleagues brave enough to share their stories, recording videos and posting them. So we're really, really educating our workforce on a whole range of diversity topics. Moving on to some examples of diversity. So this is our diversity charter that we put into place, and just to sort of highlight a few things from this, and I can share this with you afterwards. In this charter, this is aimed at when we're recruiting for roles that are office-based, sales, management, factory management, not all the way down to operator, but management, sales, admin roles. We commit that every manager is educated in unconscious bias, that we are asking our agency partners where possible to provide us with blind CVs, and we've committed that when we renew our applicant tracking system, our current one does not have the capability to have blind CVs, but we've committed we'll ensure we have that capability when we upgrade. We have committed to sourcing candidates from a variety of channels. We've tried things like Women into Construction, which actually hasn't worked for us. So we are looking for more ideas about where we can source candidates, and we're hoping that together as a CIC we can create something to help us source more candidates. We've committed to diverse shortlists, where we have at least one diverse candidate on every shortlist. Diverse selection panels, where we have at least one male and one female assessor on all our selection panels, and we've been reviewing the prerequisites for all of our roles to ensure where it's possible we can encourage applicants from outside of our sector. So that's some of the stuff we've been doing on diversity. And then in terms of diversity data, we collected data last year. We tried in 2022, didn't do very well. So last year what we did was we engaged all of our factory managers and asked them to help us to collect data. So we asked them to invite every colleague in to a warm, dry space, offer them a cup of tea and a biscuit, and ask them to complete an online diversity data form. And as a result, you'll see we've got 74.6% response rate. And if you look on this slide, clay, concrete and futures are mainly our manufacturing areas. And we had a 70% response rate in clay, 95 in concrete and 95 in futures. And the red on there we gave people the option. If they didn't want to give us their data, we gave them the option to opt out. So we're really proud of getting such a great response rate. The one disappointment was in our sales and general admin. So our office-based people, our email-based people, our response rate was only 60%. So we've got a bit more work to do to engage the people on email to complete their diversity data. That's a challenge for us next year. Okay, and then so what do the results tell us? We compared them with the ONS construction data, and what we now got is a nice set of data that we can use as a benchmark. So in 2023, 18.3% of our workforce were female. We had 4% of our workforce were from ethnic minority backgrounds, and that compares with 5.9% from the ONS construction data. So we're below the ONS construction benchmark. We found that 6.9% of our employees declared they had a disability, and 3.7% of our employees had a religion other than Christianity. And then we've got some age profile data which reflected what we knew already. So we've now got a bit of a benchmark. We haven't collected data on all areas of diversity yet, but this was a great start. And what we now are committed to doing is to start looking at the data, breaking it down by site and comparing it with local labour market information to identify where we should be trying harder to recruit a more diverse workforce. So, for example, having a look at each of our factories and saying, you know, what's the local population looking like in terms of ethnicity, and if our number of employees is way below the local population, we ought to be working a bit harder to recruit a more diverse ethnic groups. So that's next steps. So in summary, you know, how's it going and what's next? In summary, we think we've made some good progress, but there's still so much more to do. We think that we've done a lot better on inclusion than diversity, and that was the intention. We started off saying we were going to focus on inclusion first. So if we were to mark our own homework, I think we would give ourselves a bit of a 7 out of 10 for inclusion, because we have made some excellent progress there. We have developed this strong culture of belonging. We do find that more and more people are feeling comfortable speaking out and sharing their stories, and our employee engagement feedback revealed that 75% of our employees feel that Ibstock is a place where people can be themselves. We've recently launched Allies, and we need to do a bit more work on that, but we really want to promote the fact that we can all be allies for people with minority groups. And we've recently created an ED&I steering group, which is made up of 5 or 6 members of our senior leadership team who are committed to helping us define and then drive our ED&I journey going forward. And each of those senior leaders has agreed to sponsor one of the affinity groups to give those affinity groups a bit more focused leadership. So this year, we're hoping to see a load more work coming out of those affinity groups. In terms of diversity, we've made good progress against our women in leadership target. We've made some good progress about hiring people with more ethnic diverse people into our SG&A populations, but we recognise we've still got a load of work to do to attract minority groups into our industry. And we see early careers as a key opportunity. So we're currently working on a project to reduce bias in the selection process for our apprentice recruitment. So we are currently training all of our assessors for apprentice recruitment in unconscious bias, and we are partnering them in terms of the assessment process with somebody from a volunteer from a minority group to help challenge any decisions that take place during apprentice recruitment this year. And we're hoping that will drive reduced bias in our selection process for apprentice recruitment. And we're also keen to learn from the rest of you in the CIC. So we know we give ourselves probably a 3 out of 10 score for diversity. We know we need to do more. And one of the reasons we're part of the CIC is we want to work alongside other great companies and work together to increase the diversity of our population at Ibstock. So that is the end of my whistle-stop tour. So Kerry, have we got any questions?
So Kay had just popped a comment into the chat box just in regards to understanding a little bit more around how you collected that diversity data within the questionnaire. That question popped out just before you started talking around it. So Kay, I don't know if that answered your question or if you had something more you'd like to ask.
Sorry. No, I just wanted to understand, because obviously we do collect equality information, equal opportunities information on when employees join, and we want to revisit that. I think I need to expand our form, and I just want our questionnaire basically. I mean, I would like to understand off yourself and other members of the group, or actually receive an example of how you worded your questionnaire and what was it based around. So having that sort of information so we could build ours up would be really helpful.
Absolutely, we can do that. One of the things that I've made a note of that, because what we would like to do now is start to create some resources that are examples from each of our organisations. I know Karen's got some information as well, but we can certainly put the paperwork we use to collect diversity data onto a new resources tab that we're going to create on the CIC website for members, and give you some examples that some of the other organisations, like you can have an Ibstock example, you could probably, Karen's nodding, so have a Genuit example as well, and you can then, rather than starting from scratch, you can take what we've done and tweak it to your needs. So yes, Kay, we can do that.
That would be perfect. Thanks.
Excellent. And Jeff's got his hand up. So Jeff, the floor is yours.
Hi, good morning. Thanks very much. And an excellent presentation, very impressive kind of efforts. I'm curious about the kind of resources you had in-house and whether you also relied on perhaps outside consultancies or resources to either collect the data or implement some of these programs.
Yeah,
it seems very demanding.
We haven't used, I'm just trying to think, we use external resources to do the leadership training, but apart from that, and we've done most of it ourselves. So you know, a lot of the work we've done in terms of the awareness stuff has been driven by the affinity groups, which is great because you share the load. Although someone in my team has been involved in, you know, setting things up and communicating it and getting it on the websites. So I wouldn't say it's been hugely demanding. You do need someone focused on it. Joe's come on camera now, so feel free to say something, Joe. But we've done most of it with actually very little budget and not a huge amount of resource. Joe, did you want to say anything?
I just wanted to say, I think, you know, like there's been lots of successes around this, and Anthea did it greatly, but the affinity groups and getting the employees themselves to talk about what we think we need is much more effective in driving the change than consultants coming in. So, you know, they're telling us what we need to think about, and their peers to other key stakeholders, employee groups. So we drive a lot of it through that, and then we do quite a lot of promotion of it. But I think that's been the secret to whatever success we've got. But I would say that we're still on a big journey.
Thanks, Joe.
Excellent. Any other questions?
Okay.
If anybody has got anything that they think of, please do put it in the chat box. Otherwise, I think the floor is yours, Karen.
Okay, Karen.
Trying to make sure I can get off mute. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Fabulous. Thank you. And that was
me next when you want next, all right.
I know. So you're going to have to bear with us. We did say, didn't we, Anthea, that we probably should have done a bit of a practice of the technical piece, but we'll see. So yeah, please fast forward for me. So thanks everybody for your time today. I'm not sure how I can follow that with Anthea, because that was fabulous and we've not spoken about all of that. So that was lovely to learn more. I do a similar role to Anthea at Genuit. So I'm the talent director here, so looking after everything from obviously D&I, but through to recruitment, as well as all our internal talent review activity across the whole group. Just a little bit about us as an organisation, if you're not familiar, we've got about 3,500 colleagues who work across sort of 28 sites, and we have 3 business units, and that's kind of where this role comes in, because our operating model has changed in the last couple of years, and it's about us working together as a group to deliver more. Around D&I is where my focus is. So if I look backwards in the rearview mirror, so I've been here a couple of years. Before I arrived, obviously there was lots of great activity that went on, particularly at a local level around sort of working with apprentices, reach out into the school sort of education arena, lots of promoting sort of women in business and that kind of activity. But I think it's fair to say that what we didn't have was a joined effort. And that was part of the reason for my role around obviously all the talent activity, but particularly on this subject was let's pull the resources together a little bit, as Anthea's just been describing. I think they did to deliver more. If you don't know what we do, well, we create products to be used within the building sector in a sustainable way. We have our 3 business units which are focused on sort of climate management, water and sustainable building. And Steve Hollenby's on the call today, who leads the water management solutions business. So I'll leave him to answer any questions on the business. So let's move forward, Anthea. So, as I say, I started this journey with Genuit in 2022. And a little bit like Anthea, you know, we started with, oh, so why do we need to do this? I mean, clearly the board and the senior team had decided something kind of, we wanted to do more. Otherwise, my role wouldn't have been created and kind of brought in to do it. But when we took a look at our stats, and it's interesting, we've just had a conversation about that, is we didn't actually have a lot of data, to be fair. So we had diversity data around gender, because frankly, in the UK, you have to create that for the HMRC. We didn't have anything about gender orientation, though. And ethnicity was patchy data. And some of it, I would say, was quite, let's just say there were terminologies being used that I didn't think were appropriate for now, because we've got colleagues that have worked with us for 50 years, which is fabulous. But, you know, the world's moved on a bit, perhaps from the data that we held on them then to what we want to hold on them now. So we decided to just look at the data that we actually had, that we felt that was useful as a bit of a benchmark. So we had a look at our gender data, and that's what's on the screen here, you know. And if we say, well, about 51% of the communities we serve, and that's from, you know, similar to the ONS data, are female, well, you know, we ought to be reflecting at least some way there of our population internally. And the process, the thought process that goes alongside that, of course, is that if you reflect the community, you can better understand them and serve them. 25% of our colleagues at that time were female. We didn't have any on the board in major roles. So this is, so we did have some non-execs that were female, but not in major positions. Our GLT is our leadership team, so that sort of top couple of layers in the organisation, and about 25% of them were female. But what was really interesting is the number that were coming into the business was not as big as they actually were. So only 21% of our hires were female, but 23% of our leavers were female. So that's why I call it like the bucket was leaking, right? We weren't even ever going to fill it up. But promotions wise, about 41% were female. So we kind of, you know, that there were some positives in there, but the whole cycle, if you like, of bringing and moving people through and up in the organisation probably wasn't quite as well oiled as we needed it to be. And the upshot of it is what I agreed with the board at the time was, it's unlikely you're going to unpack this without some kind of structured action. And that's what we agreed to. So Anthea, if you could just forward on the slide, please. So my background, I should say, is in doing similar roles to this in other organisations, some more mature, some less so. And so from all that work, I've been able to kind of stand back and go, well, what's it really going to take to change this? Yeah. And I would say there's kind of 4 types of things that you need in a recipe to make the change really happen in D&I. The first is you need symbolic actions. And these can be things that are led centrally. So, you know, having an ambition, having a charter like Anthea described, calendars of events that you're going to, you know, symbolically, you know, perhaps raise a flag for Pride or turn the place purple like we did for International Women's Day. And you're going to need to do things like, you know, train your leaders. They're big things that you've got to invest in, or else the change won't happen. You then have to hardwire that change into the business, so into the DNA of the way people work. Anthea used a really good example before with her blind CVs and, you know, and like the systems that they choose going forward. So you know that so it could be things like that, having working groups, having partnerships established, that kind of really do nudge and push you to how you behave. The next thing group are in kind of, I think it was Joe who said it before, are the bit that really makes the change happen and sustain it. So if the symbolic stuff kickstarts and kind of keeps you nudging along, it's the everyday stuff and the leader stuff that really sustain the change and make it sticky. And that's leader behavior. So absolute having accountability at line manager level, that they are responsible and accountable for this, just like they are with health and safety or other really critically important aspects of the business. So doing things like reverse mentoring, and again, Anthony used a good example there with apprentices and having somebody in the selection area is really important. Kind of pointing out the day-to-day behaviours of a leader that have an impact is important. And then the everyday of all employees. So having a way of, if you like, noticing and celebrating of agency actually happen. So where people, you know, stick their neck out, if you like, and pull somebody up for poor behaviour, or they hear some banter in a corridor and they say, you know, we don't do that anymore. Or, you know, just saying, you know, when you said that, that really helped me, I understood that. Those sort of small, tiny things, the more they can be noticed and celebrate, is what changes a culture. And, you know, I'm sure many people on this call either have children or pets, but, you know, reinforcing positive behaviour is without doubt a great way of doing that. And then this data point, really having full gathered data, almost like just, you know, every day as part of either like a system or way of doing it. So frankly, it isn't about having to send a questionnaire out, and I understand why in lots of business we have to do that. But if we can make it into something that we just do every day, that makes a massive difference. And if we all have a think about when we fill in any kind of feedback, so if you buy something online, often they'll ask you for feedback, or you know, even if you purchase something, often you do. It's become second nature, actually, that we tell them our age, we tell them our gender. So it's kind of, how do we make that the norm in the workplace? So kind of moving everyday consumer behaviour into the workplace. Anthony, if you wouldn't mind, thank you. So here's some examples of what we did, and you know, we've only been at this, you know, sort of 18 months, 2 years, so absolutely a massive journey. But we have done some things that, you know, I'm certainly really proud of. But yeah, loads more to do. So we created a diversity and inclusion ambition. And that was after the board and the executive committee had been through some leadership training. To pick up on the question before, we have used an external facilitator to do this. Many different reasons for that. So one of it, capacity, but also because I think having an independence in those sorts of conversations really helps. And it is her subject matter expertise. We held insight sessions with our employees at site level. So we had about 400 or so employees where we literally sat down and spoke to them and asked them what diversity and inclusion meant to them. Where did they think the barriers were? And again, we used an external to hold those so that they could be really open and honest. And the outcome of that was the diversity inclusion ambition and the commitment that all senior leaders in the business, our Genuit leadership team, which is about 75, would all go through this inclusive leader training, which is like a half-day workshop where we talk about biases, we talk about what's going on in the world, their reaction to statements like white privilege, and kind of really get to a personal commitment. You know, is this something that's important to them, and what would they, how are they going to be committed about making the change? Very first step, but it's been really big, very impactful actually. for leaders in the business. Lots of them have never been on like anything like that before. And often they'll give me feedback that, you know, they've gone home and spoken to teenage daughters and things like that. And it's kind of been a bit of a revelation, actually, of perhaps some of the language, for example, that they use is perhaps not right. So yeah, so that's some examples of the big stuff. Sorry, Anthea, could you move forward, please? Some other things, we created an up-to-date diversity inclusion policy, which was obviously agreed at board, and that's now been made as part of our mandatory policy sort of rollout to new starters, and it was rolled out to all current employees. And we created like an up-to-date training module that all of our employees have gone through. It's more up-to-date number than what's on that slide now. And we've been using National Inclusion Weeks to launch that type of activity. And again, really well received. And what we've made sure in the training is there's lots about language, because we found that's one of the things that people are most sort of nervous about, actually, when it comes to D&I. They don't want to say the wrong thing, and so we've kind of tried to bust some of the myths and things around that. We've also done things like during Pride, we introduced training on LGBTQ+, and we ran like inclusion sessions again around that and some of the subject matters that came up through that. Again, in this sector, generally we're finding talking about things like sexual orientation is not quite as advanced as in others, so kind of just starting to, you know, build awareness has been really useful, particularly in our business, and for those in that community have found it really welcoming that we've done that. Anthea, could you just flick on for me? Some of the more local things we've done, and I suppose if I'm being honest, these are the things I'm most proud about, is, you know, we've kind of rallied the troops across the business. So again, where people used to do things in sort of smaller pockets, we've been able to have a more impact. So, you know, International Women's Day last year, for example, we had leaders in the business running inclusion sessions to talk about what are the local barriers and actions we need to remove. Everybody obviously turned up purple and everything else, ate lots of cake, which is obviously a positive. But also some real action came out of it. So in one of the groups, we talked about maternity and paternity pay. And as a result of that, we've just updated our family-friendly policies to an enhanced policy, which is a really great example of these real action being taken from these sessions. One of the sessions so I have a D&I working group that get together every month virtually, because they're from all across the site, and a bit like Anthea, they're people that have come forward wanting to get involved, and it's a whole mixture of levels and types of work and what have you. And something they were really passionate about was that we went big about Movember. In November, of course, you know, with 74% of our colleagues being male, this is without doubt such an important subject to us. And we actually ran all the stats about, you know, if you look at the stats where men's health impact general population and run them for Genuit's population, it gets quite scary. About the amount of people in a room who could potentially, you know, be thinking about suicide, thinking about, you know, having illnesses that they don't want to talk about. A bit like Anthea's point earlier, we had some fantastic personal stories come to the fore, and I think it was really testament actually to some of the work we've done around inclusion that people felt able to do that. We also had some really scary facial hair grown, but we won't get into that too much. So I'm not sure if we want to do that too much again. Do you mind fast forwarding for me, Anthea? Some other things, obviously, because we are here, we became a strategic partner for the Construction Inclusion Coalition, and you know that's part of our. We've done some foundational stuff internally, so now let's look to see how we can start to work on some of the bigger issues across the sector. We've done things like opening up in our IT systems the options to add your pronouns onto our different systems, which again has been very welcome by some individuals. It's also raised lots of questions from others, but that's healthy, right? And it's good to start opening up those conversations. Andy, do you mind, please? And then this, you probably can't read this, but happy to share it on our how we're going to share resources going forward. So we knew having wider diversity data is critical really for us going forward. You know, we need to be able to ensure we've got the policies and processes and business in place that can support our employees across the business. So when we introduced a new people system, which was in October last year, we've hardwired into that system full diversity data. So from social mobility questions, which has probably caused the most questions, to gender orientation, all the usual, race, religion, all that kind of good stuff. All with the option to say prefer not to say. We took the decision, other than gender data, we wouldn't load any of our old data onto the system because frankly we weren't sure it was up to date or in any way had been collected in an authentic way. We've got about 60% now of people have now gone in off their own back and filled that in, and we will continue to push that as we go. We also collect the data at point of hire, well actually at point of application, sorry, and then it gets reconfirmed at point of hire. So yeah, this time next year we're hoping to be able to do a lot more insights on that information. Sorry, Anthea, I know you were switchboard. So where are we now? What's the so what of it all? You know, well, hires has increased slightly. It's not massive, but you know, these numbers are never going to move massively. Actually, percentage of colleagues has gone up to 26%. Really pleasingly, with some selection activity that took place recently, our board key roles, we now have a quarter of those as female, and GLT leaders has significantly increased as well. So we're going there, we're getting there, we're in the right direction, but still lots to do. So I think I've got one more slide, which is kind of what we got planned for this year. So the employee resource groups, the you know, sort of maturing of that working group is something that we're going to be looking at. We do want to set some kind of targets, KPIs, and we want to continue with our leader education. We're kind of moving down to the next level. And we've made the decision with the calendar of activity that we're going to celebrate. We're just going to be consistent to the last couple of years. We're not going to try and do too much. We've got lots of other things going on in the business as well. So just for this year, we're going to just maintain rather than add. And I think that's it. So if you've got any questions, fire away.
Okay, there's currently no comments in the chat box. If anybody would like to ask any questions, please do just pop your hand up. Okay, looks quite silent at the moment.
Yeah, if people later on think of questions, please feel free to send them in to us. One of the things that we're trying to do here is to assess what people are interested in so we can do some deep dives in some of the topics later on. So feel free to let us know afterwards. And thank you for joining us. Please encourage people to share, watch the recording if you think they find it interesting, and keep letting us know. Let us know what you think. Brilliant.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Well done.
Andy.
Thanks, everyone.